I used to work night security at a high-rise apartment building in downtown Cleveland back in 2018. It was one of those glass and concrete towers with 30 floors, mostly young professionals and a few older wealthy tenants. The building looked modern from the outside, but inside, it constantly had problems. The hallway lights flickered randomly, the air conditioning cut out for no reason, and the elevators were always acting strange. There were 3 elevators in the lobby, side by side, but usually only 2 of them worked properly at any given time. My shift started at 11 p.m. and ended at 7 in the morning. Most nights were quiet. I'd sit behind the front desk, watch security cameras, let residents inside if they forgot their key fobs, and occasionally deal with noise complaints. After midnight, the building usually became dead silent except for the hum of the vending machines near the laundry room and the elevators moving up and down every now and then. The elevators had this low mechanical groan whenever they stopped at a floor. Residents complained about it constantly, but management never cared enough to fully fix them. One elevator in particular, the one on the far left, had the worst reputation. People said it would randomly stop between floors or open on the wrong level. I personally never had issues with it at first, so I figured people were exaggerating. Then one Friday night in November, something happened that completely changed the way I looked at that building. It was around 1:40 a.m. when a tenant named Melissa came downstairs looking upset. She was maybe in her late 20s, always polite whenever I saw her. That night she looked pale and nervous. She walked straight to the desk and asked me if someone had been messing around on the 14th floor. I asked her what she meant. She said she got into the elevator on the lobby level, pressed 22, but the elevator stopped on 14 first. When the doors opened, she said the hallway lights were off except for one at the far end. She told me she saw a man standing perfectly still near apartment 1408. At first that didn't sound unusual. Residents came home late all the time. But then she said the weird part. The man was facing the wall. Not moving. Not looking at his phone. Just standing inches away from the wall with his hands at his sides. Melissa said she stayed inside the elevator waiting for the doors to close, but before they could, the man slowly turned his head toward her without moving the rest of his body. She said something about the way he looked at her made her immediately hit the door close button repeatedly. I remember trying not to laugh because it sounded like the setup to a horror movie, but she genuinely looked disturbed. I told her I'd check the cameras. When I pulled up the footage from the 14th floor hallway camera, I immediately felt confused. The hallway was completely empty. No man. No movement. Nothing. Melissa stood beside me while I replayed the footage from the exact time she claimed the elevator doors opened. The elevator opened on 14 for about 6 seconds before closing again, but the hallway camera showed absolutely nobody standing there. Melissa got quiet after that. She muttered, "Maybe I'm just tired," then headed back upstairs using a different elevator. I forgot about it for maybe an hour. Then around 3 a.m., the left elevator started acting up again. I noticed on the panel behind the desk that it kept stopping at random floors even though nobody had called it. It would go from 3 to 11 to 18 to 14, then back down to 2. At first I assumed someone inside was messing around. But after watching it happen for almost 10 minutes straight, I realized something strange. Nobody was getting in or out. The lobby camera never showed the doors opening downstairs, and the floor cameras showed empty hallways every time the elevator stopped. Eventually I radioed Marcus, the maintenance guy working overnight in the basement. I asked him if he could check the elevator because the system was glitching again. He sounded annoyed but said he'd take a look. A couple minutes later, I watched on camera as Marcus entered the left elevator from the lobby carrying his toolbox. The doors closed, and the elevator started moving upward. It stopped on floor 14. The doors opened. Marcus stepped halfway out, then suddenly froze. Even through the grainy security footage, I could tell something caught his attention. He slowly backed into the elevator again, and immediately hit another button. The doors started closing. Right before they shut completely, Marcus suddenly jammed his arm between them like he was trying to stop them from closing all the way. Then he leaned forward and stared into the hallway again. A second later, he pulled his arm back and the doors closed. The elevator came straight back down to the lobby. When Marcus walked out, he looked unsettled. I asked him what happened. He hesitated for a few seconds before answering. Then he said, "There was somebody standing down there." I felt my stomach tighten immediately. I asked if it was a resident. Marcus shook his head slowly. He said, "I don't think so." Then he described the exact same thing Melissa had described earlier. A man standing motionless near apartment 1408 facing the wall. Neither of them knew each other. Neither of them could explain why the hallway cameras showed nothing. Marcus refused to go back upstairs after that. He actually suggested maybe a camera was malfunctioning, but even he didn't sound convinced. Around 4:15 a.m., things somehow got worse. The emergency phone inside the left elevator suddenly activated. That almost never happened. The emergency line connected directly to the front desk, so when it rang, I answered immediately. At first all I heard was static. Then breathing. Very slow breathing. I said, "Hello? Do you need help?" No response. Just breathing. Then somewhere in the background, I heard the faint sound of someone knocking. 3 slow knocks. Then the line went dead. I checked the elevator tracker instantly. The elevator was sitting motionless on floor 14. And somehow, the doors were open. The second story happened to me when I was staying at a hotel outside Atlanta during a work trip in 2021. I worked for a medical supply company at the time, and I had to travel constantly between hospitals delivering equipment and helping install software systems. Most of the hotels I stayed in were forgettable, but this one still sticks in my head because of what happened over the course of a single night. The hotel itself wasn't bad. It was one of those newer business hotels near the interstate with 6 floors, gray carpets, bright white hallways, and a lobby that smelled like coffee all the time. I checked in around 9 p.m. after driving for almost 6 hours straight. I remember being exhausted. My room was on the 5th floor near the end of the hallway. The woman at the front desk told me one of the elevators was temporarily out of service, so everyone had to use the other one near the lobby entrance. At the time, that didn't seem important. I grabbed my bag, got inside the elevator, and immediately noticed how strangely quiet it was. Normally, elevators in hotels have some kind of music or background noise, but this one was completely silent except for the faint buzz from the overhead light. It also moved slower than normal. The doors closed, and the elevator jerked slightly before starting upward. I remember looking at the floor numbers because the movement felt uneven, like it was struggling. When it reached the 5th floor, the doors opened halfway before stopping for a second. Then they fully opened. That was the first thing that made me uncomfortable. The second thing was the man standing directly outside the elevator. He was older, probably late 50s or early 60s, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. He wasn't doing anything threatening, but something about him felt off immediately. He just stood there staring inside the elevator like he'd been waiting for it. I nodded politely and walked around him into the hallway. As I passed him, I noticed he smelled strongly like cigarette smoke even though the hotel was non-smoking. I walked toward my room and heard the elevator doors close behind me. A few seconds later, I heard them open again. Then close. Then open again. I looked back and saw the elevator sitting there with nobody inside it. The doors kept opening and closing repeatedly like something was interrupting the sensor. The old man was gone. I honestly figured he'd walked away while I was getting my key card out, so I ignored it and went into my room. Around midnight, I was still awake watching TV when I heard a loud metallic bang from somewhere down the hall. At first I thought someone dropped luggage or slammed a door. Then I heard it again. Bang. It sounded mechanical. A few seconds later, I heard voices outside. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 hotel employees standing near the elevator at the end of the hall. One of them was pressing buttons repeatedly while the other spoke into a radio. The elevator doors were stuck halfway open. From where I stood, I could hear the motor making this strained grinding noise like the elevator was trying to move while the doors were jammed. After about a minute, the employees managed to close the doors manually. I figured that was the end of it. But maybe 20 minutes later, my room phone rang. I answered half asleep expecting the front desk. Instead, all I heard was static. Then a man's voice quietly said, "Don't use the elevator." I sat there confused for a second and said hello multiple times, but the line disconnected. At first I assumed it was some drunk guest messing around, but the timing bothered me. I checked the hallway through the peephole again. Empty. Everything quiet. I tried convincing myself it was nothing and eventually laid back down. Sometime around 2 a.m., I woke up needing water. The ice machine was down the hall near the elevator. I remember debating whether to bother going or just wait until morning, but I was awake anyway, so I grabbed the ice bucket and stepped outside. The hallway felt colder than before. Not freezing, just noticeably colder. As I walked toward the elevator area, I noticed the elevator doors were open again. Completely open this time. The lights inside were on, but the elevator wasn't moving. It just sat there empty. The ice machine was directly across from it. While filling the bucket, I kept glancing over at the elevator for some reason. It made me nervous even though there was nothing visibly wrong. Then I heard something. Breathing. Very faint at first. I stopped moving and listened carefully. It was definitely coming from inside the elevator. Slow breathing. Like someone standing quietly in the corner trying not to be noticed. I stared into the elevator, expecting somebody to step out or say something, but nobody did. The breathing continued for maybe 5 seconds. Then suddenly stopped. Completely silent again. I backed away immediately and started walking quickly toward my room. Right before I reached my door, I heard the elevator chime behind me. I looked back. The doors were closing. And just before they shut completely, I saw someone standing inside. It was the same older man from earlier. But now he wasn't looking at me. He was facing the back wall perfectly still with his hands at his sides. The elevator doors closed fully. A second later, I heard it begin moving downward. I waited until morning to mention anything to the front desk because honestly I felt stupid even bringing it up. The woman working the desk listened quietly while I explained what happened. When I mentioned the older man, her expression changed slightly. She asked me what he looked like. I described him as best I could. Gray hair. Dark jacket. Smelled like cigarettes. She went silent for a few seconds before telling me something that immediately made my stomach drop. About 8 months earlier, a guest matching that exact description had died inside that elevator after suffering a heart attack late at night. Apparently he'd been trapped inside for almost 40 minutes while the elevator malfunctioned between floors. The reason they recognized him so quickly was because multiple guests had reported seeing an older man near the elevator late at night ever since it happened. Most people assumed the stories were rumors started by hotel staff. But before I could even respond, the woman leaned forward slightly and asked me one question I still think about. She said, "When you saw him, was he facing the back wall?" The third incident didn't happen to me directly, but I knew the person involved. It was a friend of mine named Daniel who used to live in Chicago and worked as a late-night delivery driver for a pharmacy distribution company. We stayed in touch because we both worked odd hours, and we'd sometimes call each other during breaks just to pass time. This happened in early 2020, a few months before everything shut down globally, when delivery work was still normal and nobody thought much about late-night routes through hospitals and apartment complexes. Daniel told me this story one night during a call, and even though he tried to laugh it off at first, I could tell it genuinely unsettled him. He had a route that covered several buildings downtown, mostly medical offices and residential high-rises that received after-hours deliveries. One of his regular stops was a large mixed-use building with offices on the lower floors and apartments above. It had 2 main elevators in the lobby and a separate service elevator used for maintenance and deliveries. Daniel usually used the service elevator, but that night it was out of order for inspection, so he had to use the main ones like everyone else. He arrived at the building around 1:10 a.m. The lobby was almost empty except for a security guard sitting behind the desk watching something on his phone. Daniel signed in, grabbed his cart, and headed to the elevators. He said the moment he pressed the button, he noticed something strange. Both elevators were already on the first floor. That wasn't unusual by itself, but what caught his attention was that neither one opened immediately. They just sat there with the doors closed for almost 10 seconds before one finally opened. He stepped inside with his cart and selected the 18th floor, where the medical offices were located. As the doors closed, he said he heard faint scratching sounds coming from somewhere above him inside the elevator shaft. He ignored it at first, assuming it was just maintenance work. But the ride felt off. The elevator didn't move smoothly. It stopped briefly between floors, then continued, then stopped again, like it was hesitating. When it finally reached the 18th floor, the doors opened halfway and then stopped. They stayed stuck like that for a few seconds before slowly opening the rest of the way. Daniel said he immediately noticed the hallway lighting was dimmer than usual. Not completely dark, just low enough that the far end of the hallway looked like it was fading into shadow. He started unloading his cart, but after a few seconds he realized how quiet everything was. No HVAC noise. No distant footsteps. Nothing. Just silence. He pushed the cart forward a few feet, and that's when he saw someone standing near the end of the hallway. At first he thought it was a maintenance worker because of the posture. The person was facing away from him, standing close to the wall, completely still. Daniel called out thinking maybe they were there for repairs. No response. He started walking closer, thinking maybe they didn't hear him. As he got within maybe 20 feet, he noticed something that made him slow down. The person wasn't wearing any reflective gear or uniform. Just dark clothing. And they were standing too still. Not shifting weight. Not moving at all. He stopped pushing the cart. Called out again, louder this time. Still nothing. Then the elevator behind him chimed. He turned briefly, expecting it to close and leave, but it stayed open. He said that's when he started feeling uneasy. He looked back at the figure again, and for a second, he thought it slightly moved its head. Not turning fully. Just a small tilt, like it was listening. Daniel said he felt a sudden urge to leave immediately. He backed up toward the elevator while keeping his eyes on the figure. The moment he reached the cart, the elevator chimed again. He pushed the cart inside quickly and hit the button for the lobby. The doors started closing, but as they did, he looked out one last time. The figure was still there. Still facing the wall. Still motionless. As the doors shut completely, Daniel said he clearly heard something inside the hallway. A slow dragging sound. Like something shifting closer to where he had just been standing. The elevator started descending, but halfway down it stopped suddenly between floors. The lights inside flickered once. Then the intercom inside the elevator crackled on by itself. Daniel said he didn't press anything. He just stood there listening. At first there was nothing but static. Then a voice came through. Quiet. Low. Almost distorted. It said, "Don't come back up here." Then silence. The elevator continued moving down without him pressing a button. When the doors finally opened in the lobby, Daniel said the security guard was no longer at the desk. The entire lobby was empty. He wheeled his cart out quickly and went straight to his truck. Later that night, he called the building to report the elevator issue and the strange voice, but the maintenance team told him there were no recorded malfunctions that night. No stops between floors. No intercom activation. No issues at all. When he insisted something had happened, they checked the lobby footage and told him something even more confusing. According to them, the elevator never stopped on the 18th floor. It went straight up and down without any delay. And there was no figure visible in the hallway at any point. Daniel stopped talking for a moment on the phone after telling me that. Then he said the part that still sticks with me the most. He said, "But I know what I saw. And I know I wasn't alone in that hallway." And then he added something quieter, almost like he didn't want to say it out loud. "Because right before the doors closed, I swear it looked right at me.